So welcome to those who are watching on the recording. This is one of our sessions as part of the Class of 2022 week taking place this week. And this session's all about thinking around postgraduate study. So very much partly perhaps for those who are already thinking about it, but also maybe for those who haven't thought about it but are interested in considering it as an option. So my name is Chris Webb. I'm a Senior Employability Advisor with the Sheffield Hallam Careers Employability team. I've included my email on the slides that we will send out following this session as well. Yeah, just so that you know who I am, and obviously if you want to contact me afterwards, if there's any questions we don't cover, that opportunity is there. So before we start, I'd just like to find out a little bit about what's brought people to this session today. So in a second, I'm going to put a link into the chat. It's the link that you can see at the top of the screen, which is polev.com/Christopher W685. And I'd just like you to kind of put yourself into one of these three categories. So if you put the link at the top into your web browser, into your phone, into your tablet, it will come up with an online poll that you can answer to share your thoughts. So we've got three options here. So number one, you might be thinking about postgraduate study, but you're not sure where to start. Number two, you might have started to research postgraduate study, but you're not really sure, still feeling a bit unsure about everything. And number three, you might be confident this is the right route for you, but you're still looking for additional support, some of which we're going to talk about today. So some people have already got this working, which is brilliant. I'm going to pause the recording now and just put the link in the chat so other people can access this as well. So we're back on the recording, and yeah, really interesting to see kind of where people are at, who we've got in the room today in terms of what's brought you to the session. So about a quarter of people thinking about postgraduate study, not sure where to start, which is one of the main things we're definitely going to be focusing on in today's session. Another quarter of people have already started to research, but maybe feeling a little bit unsure. And then sort of half of the people here today, quite confident that postgrad is the route you want to go down, but maybe looking for additional support. And we'll find out as we go through today what additional support that might be that you're looking for. So thanks to everyone who shared their thoughts there. The second thing that I'd like you to do, and again, I'm going to change the poll in a second so that you've got another question that comes up on that link, is what kind of interests you in undertaking a postgraduate course or further study? And this will be useful for helping us answer some of the questions that people have today. So in a second, if you stay on the poll, the link that I shared previously, a new question will come up in a second. It will ask you what interests you about undertaking a postgraduate course or further study. And I'd just like you to share your thoughts. You know, what's got you thinking about this as a potential, career route or next step after finishing your degree. It's all anonymous. So again, please do share your thoughts if you feel comfortable doing that. So we're back on the recording, and again, we can kind of see here some of the thoughts of people who've attending the session today in terms of, what's kind of maybe got them thinking about postgraduate study. So some really interesting responses. So for some people, it's a very specific focus. That might be a research focus, thinking about things like PhDs. For some people, it's about changing career direction. So you've maybe done one particular type of course, but you're looking to expand into another industry or a related industry, and you need that master's course or a conversion course to do that. For some of you, you've got a really broad undergraduate degree, but you're wanting to specialize in something. So again, we're finding that that's kind of quite common at the moment. For some of you, it's opening up different career paths, so different areas that perhaps you haven't considered before. And for some of you, it's maybe thinking about future prospects. So there's a comment here about having a master's degree increasing your chance of kind of graduate job opportunities, salary. We'll come on to that in a second. That is kind of really worth interrogating, as it's not always kind of a black and white issue, really. So some really interesting kind of thoughts from people, really interesting, I guess, insights about what's brought you here. And hopefully that will inform some of the stuff that we talk about today and some of the questions that you're hoping to get answered as part of this session. So before we kind of start, really what this session is going to kind of encompass is looking first of all at the reasons for potentially selecting a postgraduate course or choosing to do postgraduate study. We're then going to move on to talk about some of the practicalities around things like finding courses, funding and applications. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the support that's available following this session, because again, within an hour, there's only so much that we can fit in. And it's useful to know where you can continue to get that support if you're looking to apply for postgraduate study this year. So the first thing that's really, really important to consider is asking yourself these questions, thinking about before you even get into the idea of, okay, there's a specific course I'm looking at, it's worth considering, is postgraduate study the right move for you at this point of your career? So some of the key questions to ask yourself: what type of postgraduate degree do you want to do? And we're going to come on to that in a second. It is quite not a confusing market, but it's a very broad market. There's lots of different postgraduate courses out there. It's certainly not just master's or PhD, which it's sometimes presented as. A key question is it essential for my career? So that kind of links back to one of the comments we had about, postgraduate sort of qualifications giving you perhaps a better salary or giving you, more job opportunities. This can be true, but not always. So a lot of this can depend on the industry. A huge proportion of graduate jobs, so somewhere in the region of 75% plus of graduate employers, don't recruit specifically on degree classification or title. They recruit on the transferable skills from the degree. So it's really worth bearing in mind that you don't always need a postgraduate degree in order to have that chance of securing a graduate role. So that's something that's useful to challenge. For some industries, yes, it might be essential. So for example, if you've come from a non-law background and you're wanting to move into law through the kind of solicitor or the barrister route, then yes, conversion courses or kind of professional courses are things that you might have to take. However, for other industries, it might be that your undergraduate degree is enough to get you into a graduate level role, and that actually the postgraduate degree doesn't necessarily increase the prospect of doing that. So it's really worth challenging that idea of, will a postgraduate degree definitely give me greater opportunities? And again, I'll show you some information later that's useful in terms of when you're thinking about that type of thing. It's also worth thinking about, is a postgraduate degree something you need to do right now? For a lot of people, postgraduate degrees are often things they consider directly after the undergraduate degree, or even following a different postgraduate degree. But it's worth remembering that you can do postgraduate study at any point throughout your career. One thing that's worth being aware of, which we'll talk about a bit later, is finances. And certainly for kind of UK home-based students, that master's loan that you receive or can receive for further study is only available once within your career. So that's why it's useful to consider, is postgraduate study the right thing for me right now, or is it something I might want to do a little bit later on? We'll talk a bit later on about professional courses, vocational courses. So for some people, it may be that they don't know what type of postgraduate degree they want to do until they've had some time within industry and thought about the sort of specialisms that they might want to pursue. So if you've just started thinking about postgraduate study and you're not 100% sure about it, just be aware that it's not something you have to do right now. But it is really worth exploring it, being aware of what's out there so that you can kind of make an informed decision. A couple of other things that we're going to be kind of addressing today, I guess, in the session. Can you afford it? What's the financial support that's available for postgraduate study? We'll be talking about that from both a master's level and a PhD level, and other professional courses as well. And we're also going to be talking about what's next. So things like applications, application deadlines, personal statements, and where you can find information and support to help you as you go through that process. So that's kind of what we're going to be covering today. If you've got any questions at all as we go through the session, or if there's anything that you don't think we're covering that you'd really want to know about, please put it in the chat. Please let us know. Is there something that we've not talked about so far that you think, I really want to know about that? Let us know in the chat and we can pick those questions up as we go through the session. Equally, I'll leave a little bit of time at the end to answer any other questions that people might have. So that's kind of going to be our agenda really for today. So I think the first thing is, if you've kind of sat down, you've thought about postgraduate study, and you definitely think it's one of the options that you might want to consider after finishing your degree, I can't really stress enough the importance of research. And that's research in a number of different areas. So some of the research is what we talked about in terms of maybe your industry. So looking at, okay, do you need a postgraduate course to get into your industry? And I'll share some resources at the end that can kind of help you with finding out the answers to some of those questions. But the other way that you can kind of address that is also by talking to people in your course. So talking to any of your academic tutors who are connected with industry, talking to people like your employability advisor and finding out, would you actually need a postgraduate qualification in order to get into the type of job that you may be looking to go on to? So doing that research first is really useful, but it's also really useful to actually research the institutions, the courses that you're thinking about. So many people every year will apply for postgraduate courses, and some people even start postgraduate courses without ever really looking into some of the key details they need to find out. So some of the key things that might be worth looking into when you're thinking about postgraduate study, the teaching style, the content, the assessment of the course. Now, this is particularly important because obviously over the past 18 months, 2 years, we've seen a lot of universities move a huge amount of their provision online. We're online today. 2 years ago, we would have been running this session in Careers Connect. There wouldn't have been an online option. So if you find it easier to learn online, it might be that you look for postgraduate courses where there's more of an online element. And that might mean that you have flexibility with location. You might want to, for example, go and study at the University of Exeter, but you're based here in Sheffield and you can't leave Sheffield for various reasons. So looking at their postgraduate courses and seeing, is there a way to do it entirely remotely or block learning? So maybe you go and visit that campus once every month or once every 2 months, but actually you can do the course online. So really thinking about what is the digital or the online offer. It's also worth looking at the expected independent study. We're going to talk about that in a second in terms of the different types of postgraduate courses, but how much of the postgraduate course might be independent learning from you, how much of it per week would be taught. If it's a research focused master's, how much support would you get with that side of things? How much contact time would you get? So all of that can be found out by researching universities and the courses that they offer. A really important thing to look at is alumni experience and destinations. So where do the graduates from these postgraduate courses end up? Where do they end up after finishing the course? Do they go into industry straight away? Are there opportunities to go into academia, academic research? Do people go on to secure PhDs, if that's something you have an interest in? So where do the graduates go? All of the course teams should be able to answer those questions for you. If they can't answer those questions, it's a little bit worrying because the academic teams should know their graduates and they should know what people move on to. It's also worth finding out, do they have data about their destinations? So universities are measured on a metric called graduate outcomes, which is something that gets recorded 15 months after students finish their degree. You get a survey sent to you, and that allows universities to find out where are their graduates, what are they doing, how many of them are in graduate level employment, how many are in postgraduate study, and universities will have that data that they can share. A little caveat on that, if you're an international student, that data currently doesn't exist. It's not captured amongst international students because of issues with capturing data for people leaving the UK. So be aware of that, be aware of the data that's there. Just because a university says that they have 95% of people from that postgraduate course moving on to graduate employability doesn't necessarily mean that that's reflective of every single student on that cohort. And actually, graduate outcomes really only captures undergraduate anyway. So universities might use their own data to talk about postgraduate study. So that might be, they might kind of say, from this course, we found that 85% of people move on to a job. But again, it's worth looking into that data. Where do they collect it? Where does it come from? And how many people does it represent? Does it represent everyone that studied that course or just a percentage that responded to a survey? So be aware that when you're looking at courses, there will always be marketing, there'll always be kind of an attempt to sell these courses as best as they possibly can. But speaking to people on those courses is the best way to find out this information and find out what support you actually get from the university in terms of helping you move on to the next stage after finishing that course. There are really useful websites that you can use. I've included a couple of these at the bottom of the page. So one of them is Find a Masters and one is Find a PhD. Really useful starting points for finding postgraduate courses, but lots of great advice on there as well. In addition to that, I'm also going to talk about the Prospects website today, which has some really, really useful advice sections about postgraduate study. Again, I've just mentioned a quick kind of note about rankings and reputations. So I talked about data. Most league tables that you'll find are normally about undergraduate level and not necessarily postgraduate level. So if you're looking at universities and the league tables, how do they rank for example, games design? How do they rank for courses in fashion management? It's worth checking, are they referring to just undergraduate courses or also the postgraduate courses? So all of those sort of things are worth kind of researching, really drilling down into to find out if it's the right course for you. As we spoke about a little bit earlier, there are lots and lots of different types of kind of further study, master's degrees, PhDs, diplomas. And so it's really worth being aware of the different types that are out there and how these might relate to you. So probably the most popular type of postgraduate course that people talk about is the taught master's degree. So this could be, for example, a Master's of Arts, so a Master's in Fine Art, for example, Master's in English Literature. It might be a Master's of Science, so for example, Advanced Engineering Management. But there's also other types as well. So things, for example, like Masters in Philosophy, Masters in Engineering. And these kind of taught masters also include conversion courses. So we talked earlier, for example, about things like law courses or psychology courses, where it's a conversion course so that you can get registered status with that particular professional body and can then go on to study things like the graduate diploma in law if you wanted to be a solicitor or barrister. For psychology, it might be so that you can get British Psychological Society accreditation, and then you can go on to further training as a clinical psychologist if that's what you want to do. So it's worth being aware of these different types of courses. We also have things like the MBA, which you might have heard of. MBAs are usually done by people with who've got work experience already, and then they're building up that sort of kind of professional and academic knowledge alongside maybe time that they've spent in industry. So it's worth being aware of those courses too. And we also have specific Masters of Research, so the MRes, and again, that might be for people who have a specific interest in going into a research career, whether that's academic or elsewhere. There are also kind of postgraduate courses that are not at master's level. And again, this is going to be important when we talk about funding in terms of what you can get funded for. So what you'll find is there's also postgraduate diplomas and certificates. These are master's level, so level 7, but they have fewer credits than a master's degree. So normally there's no dissertation, and that's why they're not called a master's course. Some of these courses you can't get funding for from the government, so it's worth being aware of how much they cost and whether you'd have to fund that yourself. And then PhDs, lots and lots of different types of PhDs. Some of these are integrated with a master's, so you do a master's and then move straight onto the PhD. Some of them aren't. But the key thing to remember is that PhDs you don't have to do after a master's. There are some PhDs you can apply for straight from finishing an undergraduate degree. So it's worth being aware that although sometimes there's this traditional view of undergraduate, master's, PhD, doesn't always have to be that way. And again, there's some really good information on sites like Find a PhD and Prospects, which I'll talk about later, where you can find that information. And there's also professional qualifications as well. So these are things that could be taken full-time, part-time, alongside work, or kind of directly after finishing your undergraduate studies. So there's lots of different types of professional qualifications, too many to really talk about, but they can span a wide degree of industries. Some of these might be, for example, short tech courses to kind of improve digital skills for a particular industry. Some of them might be kind of prep courses. So some graduate schemes will actually have you do maybe an 8-week training course first in order to gain maybe an industry-specific qualification that you need to start that job, but you might not have done in university. So again, we've included links on the slides to more information about professional qualifications. But again, it's worth looking into these and seeing if they're an option that could be right for you too. In terms of the application process, again, this is something that can vary, and it's really worth kind of mentioning and pointing out that for postgraduate study, it's quite a different experience than it is for applying for undergraduate courses. And one of the reasons for that is it's not done through a central portal like UCAS, for example. So if you've kind of if you're a home student particularly, so a home UK student, and you've applied for university straight from school or college, you'll be familiar with that idea of UCAS portal. You can apply for up to 5 opportunities, so 5 different courses at different institutions, and that is all managed through a central process. Postgraduate, very different. So the first thing that's really different about it is you can apply for as many courses as you want. Now, obviously, the advice that we would give is if you apply for loads and loads of different courses, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of your time, it's a lot of things to keep track of. So, you know, it is useful to kind of be selective with how many courses you apply to, but it's worth being aware that you do have more freedom about how many courses you can apply for in postgraduate. The other side of things is that what you prepare for the course in terms of the application can be very, very different depending on the university and depending on the course that you're applying for. And that's something I'm going to talk through in a second. So just a bit of kind of overarching information. Again, usually apply for postgraduate study directly through the university. Some of this is still via UCAS, so things, for example, like nursing. But it's also worth remembering that things that used to be on UCAS, like teaching, is now through a completely different system. The government and the Department for Education have got their own system for applying for teacher training. So again, useful to know that some of these different courses have different application methods. Again, deadlines may be different. We found that last year, for example, lots of universities pushed their postgraduate course deadlines back, application deadlines, because of what was happening with COVID. They were kind of looking at how they could adjust their courses, whether it would be online, how much of it would be in person. So it may be the same this year. We may see some deadlines push back. Don't forget, with postgraduate courses, quite a few of them will have January starts as well. So they're not always just September starts. So it might be that you're looking to take a bit of time out after your undergraduate degree or after finishing your current studies before starting anything else. And again, sometimes those January starts are a way to do that. And it's also worth remembering, if you're an international student, it's worth checking the requirements about these courses and how that fits in terms of both the kind of funding and any kind of scholarships you might be eligible for, but also just in terms of things like the Tier 4 visa requirements and maybe anything extra that you might need to know about the courses you're applying for, if, for example, you're returning to a home country and then applying again from abroad. So again, just useful to sort of do that research first to be aware of kind of what's happening. Most applications for postgraduate study require these things, but again, like I say, the caveat is it could be different depending on the course or the university, which is why the research is really important. So most applications will require a personal statement that we're going to talk about in a second. Usually they'll require academic transcripts. So that might be, for example, transcripts from your first and second year of your degree. Obviously, until you've finished your degree, you can't provide your final academic transcript. So it's just your predicted grades, which essentially will be, what did you get in second year? What's your grade average? And that will represent your kind of predicted grade. We've had a good question come through, which is about how early can you apply for masters after finishing your kind of top-up degree. So effectively, a top-up degree is the final year of your undergraduate degree. So you could start applying for those courses now. There's no problem there. Again, even though you don't have your results, that's not a problem, because what you're providing is your previous results from the second year of your degree to kind of show what your predicted degree classification is likely to be. So for example, if you were achieving an average of a 2-1 in your second year, that's what you would kind of have as your sort of predicted degree classification at the moment for your final year. It's also worth kind of attaching, and you'll usually get asked to provide 2 or more references. These are usually, or they can be, a mixture of references. Usually we're talking academic. So for example, course leaders, academic advisors, people who've got evidence of your academic capability and your ability to go up to further study. But these could also be industry references as well. So for example, if you've done a work placement or something like a kind of part-time job, internship, those sort of things, it could be somebody referring to your kind of work ethic, your transferable skills that you can bring to the degree. So that might be project management, problem-solving skills, communication skills, things that you could bring to the postgraduate degree. I would say it's really useful to kind of get your references lined up early if you're thinking about applying for postgrad study. So if this is something you're planning to do, well worth talking to the academics you might want to use or the other individuals you might want to use for your references now. Get their details down, let them know you'd like to use them as a reference, and then when it does come to attaching the information, you've got it there already, even if you're not 100% sure you want to apply for postgrad study. You may also need a copy of your CV. Again, I'll talk about support that we have available to help you with writing and kind of updating your CV. And for some courses, you may require a portfolio or a show reel. So for example, if you're applying for things like graphic design, illustration, animation, it may be that you need to provide a portfolio of your work or a show reel showcasing some of the things that you've produced. The same may also be true for things like film and media related subjects as well. So worth checking the website, seeing what it is that the universities require. And for some of these courses, you may need a research proposal, or some of them you definitely will, PhDs, for example. And again, a research proposal is quite a different document to a personal statement. So we've included links on the slides to where you can find that information. But again, the sites I've mentioned earlier, Find a PhD, Prospects, have got really, really good resources about all of these sort of things. So this is an example from the Prospects website about the personal statement. Now, broadly, the personal statement in a way is kind of similar-ish to the one that you might write at undergraduate level, but it's got to be a lot more specialised because, of course, at undergraduate, you could be applying for the same course at maybe 5 different universities, or you might be applying for maybe different courses, but in the same family. So, for example, they might all have been arts-related courses or finance-related courses, but with different titles. At undergraduate level, that's not a problem. At postgraduate level, you are applying specifically to that university and that course. So you've got to be a bit more targeted and a bit more specific. So think of the personal statement for postgrad a little bit more like a cover letter for a job. So you're starting off by talking about your motivation. So why are you interested in studying this course at this institution? And then why are you a good fit for that course? So this is where universities and course teams want to know about, where does this course fit into your career plans? So you don't necessarily need to have a 5-10 year plan about what you want to do, but it's very much about, okay, where does this fit in? Why will doing this master's course or this PhD or postgraduate diploma, why will this help you? Why are you choosing to do this at this point in your career? And if you find it difficult to answer that question, it may be that you're not ready to do that course just yet, or you're not really sure it's the right course for you. So actually writing the personal statement can be a really useful exercise. So you start off by really talking about your interests, your motivation in the course, what would make you a good fit. You then talk about your sort of experience and kind of how that relates to the course. So again, this is not just your academic skills, although that's quite important, but it might also be other things you've done. If, for example, the postgraduate course has got quite a heavy industry focus and you've done a placement year, fantastic, you can talk about that. Talk about maybe how that might help you to add value to the course because you've got experience of working in the oil and gas industry, for example. The other thing to be aware of is the academic skills and showing that you're ready to take that leap up to that level 7 postgraduate study or higher. So for example, this may be talking about things like your project management skills, your ability to independently research. It may even be that talk about your experience working with academic staff or working with peers. So using technology that you know is relevant for further study. So that might be, for example, using things like Google Teams, using software like Studiosity, using things like Miro board. So the kind of collaborative online tools that would help you as you were going through postgraduate study. So this is kind of an opportunity in the personal statement to really kind of get that information across, to show them why you're interested in the course, how does it fit with your plans for the future, and then what experiences, what skills, what knowledge do you have that's going to help you to be able to take on the challenge of that course. And I mentioned earlier, obviously, about the importance of research. This is a particularly good example of why these are two academic requirements or course requirements taken from two completely different courses. So on the left, we have the Royal College of Art Fashion Design Master's course. And on the right, we have the University of Stirling in Scotland, their MSc Big Data course. So on the left, we can see from the Royal College of Art, they have a very kind of specific thing that they're looking for in terms of the type of person that studies on their course. You know, they want people, they don't mind whereabouts you're from in the world or where you've studied, but what they want to see in the portfolio you provide is very specifically that you're someone who is imaginative in the way that you approach fashion, somebody that is kind of curious about using different materials and about bringing in culture and kind of awareness of people's identity into your fashion design. There's actually even more information on the website, really specific details on this particular example about exactly what they want you to include in a portfolio. So some websites and some courses will have really detailed information. You can see also on the right-hand side, this is the MSc Big Data course at University of Stirling, that actually for some courses, they might be more open to you than you might think. So for a lot of people, they think, okay, if I've come from a background that's maybe more social science, humanities, arts-based, that I probably won't be able to go and do a technology related course. But that's not necessarily always the case at master's level and postgrad level. So for example, you can see the requirements for this course. Yes, you ideally need to have done a course that covers something like maths, computing, engineering, or analytical skills. However, applicants without these qualifications can apply if they have significant work experience. So it might be, for example, that you worked for an organization where you undertook a lot of analysis, data analysis. So it may have been that you worked for an arts administration organization or a gallery, for example, but the work you were doing was maybe kind of quite analytical, looking at marketing, visitor numbers, those sort of things. And you want to take that further in the future. So if that is the case, that's something that you can do, is kind of look at these courses and actually talk to course teams and find out, you know, could I get onto this type of course even without that experience? So it's really, really worth just doing that research and making sure you know for sure, you know, what the requirements are for these courses before you apply. We'll move on to finance and funding. Again, always kind of a really important thing to be aware of, always questions that we come up all the time about, okay, how would I fund postgraduate study? Again, it's a really, really busy picture and it depends on the type of course that you're applying for. So if we're talking about master's courses, just as a starting point, there is a government loan that you can apply for, which gets added on to your undergraduate funding, but separately. So for example, if you've already been in university for 4 years or 5 years, including a placement year, you're worried about funding, don't worry about that. If it's a master's level course, the funding you can apply for doesn't matter how many previous years you've done of undergraduate, it's separate funding. The master's loan, which you can get from the UK government, is a set fee. It's £11,570 total. Everybody gets the same amount of money, and you can apply for that up to 6 months before or after the course starts. This is money that you have to use for everything that happens during your period of master's study. So you have to use it to pay for the master's tuition fees, which can range from 5,000–6,000 up to kind of 10,000–11,000 or more, depending on the course. But it's also there to cover other costs as well. So for that reason, quite a lot of people do fund master's study through other avenues as well. Part-time work, scholarships, bursaries, whether those are through the university themselves or whether they're through other organisations. And I've included a couple of links on these slides to places like Myriad, which is an app through UCAS, and the Scholarship Hub, where you can search for scholarships and bursaries across the UK for different course areas and different types of courses. So really worth being aware that there's quite a lot of funding out there, but not always directly in one place. So sometimes you need to look around. Again, the website I talked about earlier, Prospects, has got a really good list of all the funding options that are there. For masters, as we said, this could include things like scholarships or bursaries through the university or independently. For some people, it might be employer sponsorship. So for example, degree apprenticeships. For those of you who aren't familiar, apprenticeships are basically a way to gain a qualification whilst working. So the employer pays for the qualification and also pays you a salary at the same time. If you've completed an undergraduate degree, there's nothing to stop you then doing a degree apprenticeship at master's level or even lower in a completely different subject if you have the relevant qualifications. So for example, there are many kind of workplaces that will look to upskill their workforce through a master's level degree apprenticeship. So it might be that you start a job, you're working for a couple of years, and your company identifies potential for you to go into management. They may be able to provide you with postgraduate study for free as part of the degree apprenticeship that you do whilst you're working for their company. So really worth being aware that not all postgraduate study has to cost money for you. There are other sources of kind of developing funding as well. So some people actually crowdfund to help support their financial sort of situation during postgrad study. Some people do part-time work. Some people kind of use, again, research council grants. So again, depending on the type of course you're doing, it might be that you look at things like the Arts Council, Humanities Council, Science Council, for example, and look at whether there are particular grants or kind of funding that you can apply for to kind of support your research. So for example, there might be national projects happening that need the sort of research you're doing, and you can apply for funding to support the research that you'll be doing during your postgraduate degree. So again, there's lots of different ways to do it. There's also things called PhD loans, which it's worth being aware of, which again, just simply cover the tuition fee side of PhDs. And again, all of that information is included on the slides that I'll send out. It's also worth being aware that most universities will have things like hardship funds as well. So Sheffield Hallam is no different. And it's worth checking with universities you might want to apply for about what sort of hardship funding they have, what sort of scholarships or bursaries you could apply for as a postgrad student. It's also worth mentioning that certain courses have completely different systems for funding. So teaching, for example, is funded through the undergraduate student loan scheme, but again, doesn't matter how much you've done before, everybody can apply for that undergraduate teacher training loan, but it is added to your undergraduate loan funding. And things like health and social care are often funded through employers like the NHS. So for some of these courses, you may not have to pay, or you may get a bursary or a grant from the NHS to support you undertaking that course, particularly thinking around things like nursing, where there are serious shortages within kind of the healthcare system. Again, some useful resources just before I kind of come towards the end of the presentation and take questions from anyone who's got additional questions. These are some really useful resources just to consider if you're starting out looking at postgraduate study. So at the top, we've got Prospects. Again, I've included hyperlinks to all of these images I've got on the screen, which I'll send across to anyone who's attended this session at the end of the session. So Prospects website has got lots of really useful information, not just about postgraduate study, but also job profiles for particular graduate roles within industry. These are specifically very useful if you know that you want to go into a certain type of sector or a certain type of job, but you're not really sure, would I need a postgraduate degree? This has got some really useful up-to-date information about whether that would be the case for certain jobs. There's also other really good websites. So Target Jobs have got a postgraduate sort of section of their website, which again, I've kind of hyperlinked into this slide. And some of the websites I've mentioned earlier are also really helpful. Find a master's, find a PhD. If you're looking at funding, things like the Scholarship Hub and Myriad by UCAS are really good for finding loans, scholarships, bursaries, those type of things. And it's also worth using kind of the network that you might have already or network through the university to kind of help you to find out more about particular courses or where people have gone after finishing courses. So for example, LinkedIn is really useful, finding people through the alumni tool. So if you go to the Sheffield Hallam LinkedIn page and then you click on the alumni button, you can find lots of our ex-students to ask questions about courses they've done. And you've also got platforms like the Hallam Collective. We're doing a session about this later today, actually, but the Hallam Collective is basically a kind of closed network for Sheffield Hallam students and graduates where you can connect with people online, you can seek mentoring support, you can ask questions about particular courses or job areas, and there's over 2,000 graduates on there globally that you can reach out to. So again, just useful to be aware of these things. But the main thing that I would say kind of following this session, if you're looking at postgraduate study, you've still got concerns that maybe we've not been able to answer on this session, do get in touch with our team of employability advisors. We have a specific employability advisor attached to every department. So for example, I'm attached to art and design, but all of my colleagues are attached to a different academic course team, and they can provide support, advice, information about postgraduate study in the areas that you might be interested in, whether that's connected to your course or whether it's outside of your course. I've also included our email address here if you do want to get in touch with us about any further support or have any other questions about things that we've sort of covered during the session today. The final couple of things I just want to mention, and then I'll open up for questions for people who've got any, is just to be aware that as kind of final year students, as class of 2022, so if you're a final year undergraduate or postgraduate student finishing next kind of summer or next sort of autumn, whatever degree it is you're doing at the moment, you should be eligible to apply for the kind of discounts that might come up through Sheffield Hallam for postgraduate study. So I've included the link to the website on here. More information is going to be sent out to you via email by the university once that kind of amount of money is confirmed. But it's worth being aware that for the past 2 years, we've had discounts for people who are wanting to stay at Sheffield Hallam to continue with postgraduate study. And it's just worth being aware that that exists. The caveat to that obviously is, don't make that the sole factor in your decision making, because it may be that there are other universities or other courses outside of Sheffield Hallam that are equally or more beneficial to you, even if the finance side of things is made slightly easier by being at Hallam. So just, again, doing that research, talking to people, making sure you feel really confident about the decisions you're making. And also kind of worth mentioning, as I said earlier, that you can apply for multiple courses even if you're not 100% sure yet which one you might want to study. So again, you have that option, that flexibility to apply for master's courses and also potentially to apply for graduate roles at the same time and actually do your research during the year to make a decision around this. And again, that's something our team can help with. If you've got any specific questions about postgraduate recruitment for Sheffield Hallam, there is dedicated email addresses and phone numbers that you can use. So either the inquiries at shu.ac.uk or the admissions at shu.ac.uk email address. This also includes being put in touch with course leaders. So if, for example, you're really interested in a specific course at Hallam, but you want to talk to the person who's running it, get in touch with the admissions teams. They can put you in touch with the relevant person. I'm going to come to the question in the chat in a second, just after I finish this, but also worth mentioning, you can actually speak to existing postgraduate students at Hallam through the student chat function as well. So just to be aware that that exists too. We've had a question come up in the chat, which I'm just going to pull up, about how and when you'd find out about a discount on course fees. So yeah, as I've just mentioned, there is a page on the final year and beyond pages on My Hallam. This is the link that I've got on the bottom of the page below. But if you type into Google Sheffield Hallam final year and beyond, or just final year, that page will come up. If you then look at the postgraduate study tab, which is on that page, it will tell you all of the information that I've got on the page here, including what the proposed discounts are going to be for courses. What isn't there at the moment is the list of all of the eligible courses. That's going to be coming up shortly, and you'll also get an email about that from the university. So I would say probably hold off on checking that until you've got a list of eligible courses. At the moment, it might just tell you what the discount's going to be, but obviously you'll need to check if the course you want to study is in that list, because it won't cover every single postgraduate course. Just a reminder as well that we've got other sessions coming up this week. So we've got a session this afternoon on staying connected with Sheffield Hallam, which includes details about the Hallam Collective that I mentioned earlier. And that I'm going to be running that one as well. So I might see people there if you're there later today. And we've also got some really useful sessions coming up later in this week as part of Class of 2022 week. Your Rights at Work, which is happening tomorrow morning. Managing Money with Santander, which again is going to be a really useful session, both of those in Careers Connect. And a Wellbeing for Work session about making the transition from student to graduate, which again is going to be run by our careers team and our wellbeing team in partnership. And on Friday, we've also got our Ask a Graduate panel event where we've got 6 Sheffield Hallam graduates from different graduating classes talking about their advice for final year students and reflecting on their career journeys. So quite a lot of stuff coming up this week. And again, you can find all of that under shu.ac.uk/class of week. And finally, just a reminder that you may be thinking about postgrad study beyond the end of this year. It may be that you're going to go straight into work, or you're kind of thinking about other options first. You may go travelling and then come back to it. It's just a reminder that all of the support that we provide at Sheffield Hallam from the careers team and the business enterprise team is lifelong for graduates. So it's something you can continue accessing even after you've finished the degree. So all of the stuff I've talked about today, the support that's available, you don't lose that after finishing your undergraduate degree or postgraduate degree. You continue accessing that into the future as well. So that sort of brings me to the end of what we're talking about in the session today. I appreciate it's quite a brief overview about postgrad study, just to provide you those kind of general sort of pointers. But again, our team are there to support with any additional comments, questions you might have. I'm now going to open up just to see if anyone's got any other questions, and I'll pause the recording so that if you want to come on mic or camera, you can do that. So that's brought us to the end of the session. If you've got any questions at all, do get in touch with us on careers@shu.ac.uk. And as I say, I hope you've enjoyed the recording. And if there's any questions you have, do feel free to get in touch with our careers team at any point.